My name is Caroline Ortega. Standing alone while 200 guests enjoyed their five-course meal at my mother-in-law's $2 million birthday gala in Rome, I heard my husband's words echo through the grand ballroom. Oops, we miscounted. 5 years of being the wrong kind of daughter-in-law, 5 years of forced smiles and swallowed pride, all crystallized in that single moment of deliberate humiliation. But as I stood there, every eye in that glittering room fixed on me, the Whitmores had no idea they'd just made their biggest mistake. They saw an unwanted outsider. They didn't see the woman who controlled every single detail of their precious celebration. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is the story of how one miscount cost the Whitmore family everything they held dear. 5 years ago, I met Daniel Whitmore at a charity gala in Boston. I was there coordinating the event. He was there as the golden son of one of Boston's oldest families. The attraction was immediate. Daniel was charming, attentive, everything his family wasn't. Within 6 months, he proposed with his grandmother's ring at the public garden. I thought I was living a fairy tale. The first crack appeared at our engagement party. Eleanor Whitmore, my future mother-in-law, toured my parents' modest home in Brookline with barely concealed disdain. Your parents' living room has more character than square footage, she noted, her smile sharp as crystal. My mother, a retired teacher, and my father, who ran a small accounting firm, weren't their kind of people. I later discovered Daniel had been practically engaged to Victoria Ashford before me. Victoria came from old railroad money, spoke fluent French, and had attended Swiss finishing school with Daniel's sister. The Whitmores had been planning that union for years. Then Daniel met me and, in what his family considered temporary insanity, chose love over lineage. "She's refreshing," I once overheard Daniel tell his mother. "Refreshing?" Eleanor had replied. "That's what you call sorbet between courses, not a wife." But Daniel stood by his choice, at least publicly. He'd hold my hand at family dinners, even as his mother forgot to set a place for me at her bridge club luncheons. He'd kiss my cheek when his father questioned my state school education. I convinced myself his love was enough. What I didn't know then was that Victoria never really left the picture. She remained in their social circle, a constant reminder of what Daniel should have chosen. And somewhere in my husband's wallet, tucked behind his credit cards, he still carried her photo from their college days. The exclusions started small, almost imperceptible. Family meetings about the Whitmore Foundation would happen while I was conveniently sent on errands. "Caroline, dear, would you mind picking up the flowers for tonight's dinner?" Eleanor would ask, just as the family attorney arrived. By the time I returned, decisions had been made, documents signed, and I'd find them all sharing cognac in the library. The official family portrait session was my first real humiliation. The photographer had been booked for months, a renowned artist who'd captured 3 generations of Whitmores. I'd bought a new dress, had my hair professionally styled. Then, just as we were about to begin, Eleanor touched my arm. "Oh, Caroline dear, we're taking the official portrait now. Family only, you understand. Perhaps you could help the caterer with lunch." Christmas was another careful cruelty. While Daniel's siblings received heirloom jewelry and rare first editions, I got gift cards. "We thought you'd prefer to choose something yourself," Eleanor would say, as Daniel's sister unwrapped their great-grandmother's pearl necklace. "Mom's just traditional, give her time," Daniel would say whenever I mentioned feeling excluded. "You know how Boston families are." But I was building something they didn't see. While they debated my placement at family dinners, I was quietly growing my event planning business. My company, Ortega Events International, had started landing major contracts. I'd organized galas for tech executives, coordinated weddings for international clients. My revenue hit 7 figures last year, though the Whitmores never asked about my work. To them, I was just Daniel's unfortunate choice, a phase he'd eventually outgrow. The photo from that family portrait still hangs in Eleanor's foyer. 7 Whitmores in perfect formation. If you look carefully at the edge, you can see my shadow on the marble floor, waiting just outside the frame. The Whitmore Foundation's annual charity gala should have been my moment. I'd volunteered to help coordinate, spent weeks perfecting every detail. The night arrived, and I wore a gown that cost more than my parents' monthly mortgage. I wanted desperately to fit in. The seating chart told me everything. While Daniel sat at the head table with his family and Victoria Ashford, yes, she was naturally invited, I was placed at table 12 with the junior staff from Whitmore Corporation. When the pharmaceutical executive beside me asked, "So, are you Mr. Whitmore's new assistant?" I felt my cheeks burn. During Eleanor's speech, she thanked everyone who made the foundation possible. Her children, each named with their accomplishments. Victoria, for her continued dedication to our causes. The board members, the major donors. My name was never mentioned, despite the 40 hours I'd volunteered. "At least you got to attend," Daniel said later when I mentioned feeling hurt. "Some spouses aren't even invited." But that night something shifted in me. I went home and registered my business as a sole proprietorship, legally separate from any marital assets. I opened accounts Daniel would never know about. I started documenting everything, every slight, every exclusion, every careful cruelty. The universe seemed to be preparing me for something. My company was thriving while whispers suggested Whitmore Corporation was struggling. Daniel had been coming home later, his explanations increasingly creative. There were calls he'd take in his study, door locked, and Victoria's presence at family events had become oddly constant. "You're paranoid," Daniel said when I asked about Victoria. "She's just a family friend." But family friends don't text your husband at midnight. Family friends don't leave lipstick marks on wine glasses that match the shade on your husband's collar. I built my empire while they built their walls, never imagining those walls would become their prison. Staying silent came with a price I paid in small denominations daily. My reputation in Boston's elite circles was carefully managed by the Whitmores. At social events, Eleanor would introduce me as Daniel's wife, without mentioning my name or my successful business. The narrative was clear. I was an accessory, not an equal. The financial implications were more concrete. Several potential clients mysteriously withdrew after hearing concerns about my suitability for their events. One CEO told me candidly, "Eleanor Whitmore suggested we might want someone more established." That contract alone would have been worth $300,000. Then came Daniel's ultimatum. We'd been married 4 years when he sat me down in his study, divorce papers already drafted but not yet filed. "If you can't learn to fit in with my family, if you keep causing tension, maybe we should reconsider this marriage." The papers sat in his desk drawer, a constant threat. "No Whitmore heir yet?" Eleanor would ask at every family gathering, her tone suggesting this was my greatest failure. "What exactly do you contribute to this family?" The pressure to have children became another weapon. Daniel wanted to wait until I was more settled into the family. Translation, more compliant. But I noticed things they thought I was too unimportant to understand. Whitmore Corporation's stock had been sliding for 18 months. They'd lost 3 major government contracts. Daniel's trust fund, I discovered through carelessly left bank statements, was nearly depleted. The family's financial advisor had been making increasingly urgent house calls. The Whitmores were drowning in debt while maintaining their golden facade. And I, the outsider they barely tolerated, was actually the only one in the family turning a real profit. My business accounts showed consistent growth while their empire slowly crumbled. They just didn't know it yet. The pressure intensified last month. Eleanor had her lawyer draw up a postnuptial agreement, 5 years into our marriage. The document was insulting. I'd get $50,000 and nothing else if we divorced. My business, they claimed, had been built with Whitmore connections and should be considered marital property. "Sign this or watch your little company crumble," Daniel said, sliding the papers across the breakfast table. "Mother knows every event planner in Boston. One word from her." He wasn't wrong. Eleanor had already started her whisper campaign. 2 venues suddenly claimed they were overbooked when I tried to reserve them. A catering company I'd worked with for years apologetically terminated our partnership. Mrs. Whitmore is a major investor, they explained. But while they were playing checkers, I was playing chess. Every threat was documented. Every financial irregularity I'd noticed was photographed. Late one night, I found Daniel's laptop open and discovered something explosive. Whitmore Corporation was under federal investigation for tax evasion. The family was hemorrhaging money on legal fees. The Rome birthday celebration, Eleanor's 70th, was their Hail Mary. 200 of the world's most influential people would attend. If they could secure just 3 new investors from that crowd, they might survive. The entire family fortune depended on this week being perfect, which is why they came to me. "We need the best event planner," Daniel had said 3 months ago, not even acknowledging the irony. "This has to be flawless." I smiled and agreed, knowing they'd never read the contract carefully. Why would they? I was just Caroline, the nobody from Brookline, who should be grateful for whatever scraps they threw. They signed over complete control of their most important event to the woman they'd spent 5 years humiliating. The post-nuptial agreement still sat unsigned on my desk when we left for Rome. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, hit that subscribe button right now. Your support helps me share these important stories about standing up for yourself. Comment below. Have you ever been deliberately excluded from a family event? How did you handle it? And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply enforcing your boundaries. I see all your comments about similar experiences, and my heart goes out to each of you. You deserve to be valued. Let's continue with what happened when we arrived in Rome. Rome was supposed to be Eleanor's triumph. The entire Whitmore clan had descended on the 5-star Hotel Palazzo Margherita, like conquering heroes. 200 guests were flying in from Dubai, Tokyo, London, the kind of people whose names appeared in Forbes rather than gossip columns. I'd orchestrated every detail through my company over the past 3 months. The welcome reception at the Galleria Borghese, the private yacht tour of the Amalfi Coast, the finale at a restored Renaissance villa. $2 million in carefully planned perfection. What the Whitmores didn't realize was that every contract bore my company's name, not theirs. My room assignment should have been my first warning. While the family occupied the penthouse floor, I was placed in the annex building. "Oh, your room?" the concierge said, checking his list when I asked. "Mrs. Ortega, you're in the garden wing. It's quite lovely." Translation: as far from the family as possible, while still technically being at the same hotel, Daniel disappeared our first night in Rome. His phone went straight to voicemail. His sister Margaret claimed he was handling urgent business when I found her at the hotel bar. She was 3 martinis in and loose-lipped enough to smirk. Business, right. That's what we're calling Victoria now. I spent that night alone in my garden view room, reviewing contracts on my laptop. Every vendor agreement, every venue booking, every single detail was under Ortega Events International. The Whitmores had signed the master agreement without reading it, trusting that their pathetic daughter-in-law wouldn't dare assert any real control. The irony was delicious. They'd banished me to the edges of their celebration, not knowing I held the center. Tomorrow would begin 3 days of scheduled events leading to Eleanor's birthday dinner. 3 days of careful humiliation they had planned for me. They had no idea they were dancing on a stage I could collapse with a single phone call. The second day brought a cascade of small cruelties delivered with surgical precision. At the welcome brunch, Eleanor looked me up and down. "That dress is almost the right shade of white, Caroline." Almost. Never quite right. During the yacht tour, Daniel's cousin James laughed when I tried to board with the family. "Oh, you're the wife? We thought you were event staff." Margaret pulled me aside at the museum reception. "You understand why Mother's particular, don't you? You're just not what we envisioned for Daniel." "Daniel needs someone who speaks our language," added Aunt Patricia, whose husband had embezzled half her trust fund. The whispers followed me everywhere. "That's her, the one from nowhere. I heard she trapped him." Poor Daniel stuck with that. But the real knife came when I saw them together. Daniel and Victoria, laughing by the fountain at the villa. She wore the diamond bracelet I'd seen him purchase last month, the one he said was for his mother. Her hand rested on his chest with casual intimacy. When she spotted me, she didn't even flinch. Instead, she smiled and waved, confident in her position. "Don't make a scene," Daniel warned when I approached. "Not here, not with everyone watching." Everyone was watching. That was the point. The guests had begun to notice the dynamics. The wife standing alone, the ex-girlfriend by the husband's side, the family's obvious preference. Some looked sympathetic, others amused. I was the entertainment, the cautionary tale of what happens when you marry above your station. That night, I found them in the hotel corridor. Victoria was adjusting Daniel's bow tie, their faces inches apart. "After Mother's birthday," he was saying. "I'll file the papers then." 5 years was too long to wait, Victoria replied. I stepped back into the shadows, my phone already recording. The stage was set. Tomorrow would be Eleanor's grand birthday dinner. Tomorrow, they would all learn who really held the power. I couldn't sleep after what I'd overheard, so I did what I always did when stressed. I worked. At 3 a.m., I was in the hotel's business center, reviewing final details for Eleanor's birthday dinner, when Daniel's phone buzzed. He'd left it behind when he'd slipped out earlier. The message preview showed on the screen. "Can't wait for our announcement tomorrow. V." My hands stayed steady as I unlocked his phone. His password was still his college jersey number. The messages between him and Victoria went back 2 years. 2 years of "I love yous" while he slept beside me. Photos from their secret trips when he was supposedly at business conferences. And worse, so much worse, their plans. "Once the divorce is final, we'll merge the Ashford and Whitmore assets," one message read. "Your mother's birthday will be the perfect setting to announce our engagement." Another. "Caroline's company could be useful. We'll claim it was built during the marriage." And from Victoria. "5 years of watching you with her was torture. But tomorrow, everything changes." The final insult was a message thread with Eleanor. My mother-in-law had been orchestrating this reconciliation for years. "The seating at tomorrow's dinner is arranged. Caroline won't have a place. When she makes a fuss, Daniel can file citing her unstable behavior." They planned to humiliate me so thoroughly that I'd seem hysterical, unhinged, make me the villain in their story, the unstable wife who couldn't handle her place in society. I screenshot everything, sent it to my lawyer, then placed Daniel's phone exactly where I'd found it. Walking back to my room, I passed the grand ballroom where tomorrow's dinner would be held. 200 place settings gleamed in the moonlight. 199 chairs. They thought they'd counted correctly. They thought tomorrow would be my destruction. They had no idea it would be theirs. The morning of Eleanor's birthday, I woke to an email that changed everything. Marcus Chen, CEO of Stellar Events International and my mentor, had sent a simple message. "Reviewed the contracts as requested. Remember, you have full control as primary contractor. The emergency cancellation clause is ironclad. Whatever happens today, you're protected." I'd been building this safety net for months without fully realizing I'd need it. When the Whitmores had insisted on using my company for this event, their hubris made them sloppy. They never read the fine print, never noticed that every vendor contract included a clause allowing immediate cancellation if the primary contractor, me, deemed it necessary. Marcus had taught me well. "Always maintain control of your events," he'd said when I first started. "You never know when you'll need to pull the plug." At breakfast, I sat alone as usual, while the Whitmores held court at their long table. Eleanor was glowing, accepting birthday wishes from arriving guests. Daniel hadn't even looked at me, too busy whispering with Victoria. They were practically glowing with anticipation. "Today's the day," I heard Margaret tell her mother. "Everything finally goes back to normal." Normal. Where Victoria belonged and I didn't. Where bloodlines mattered more than love, money more than loyalty. My phone buzzed with another email from Marcus. "BTW saw the Whitmore Corp investigation news. If they lose your event revenue and deposits, bankruptcy is inevitable. Your call, but know that I have 3 major clients ready to book those same venues and vendors immediately. I smiled into my coffee. The Whitmores had spent 5 years making sure I knew I held no power in their world. They were about to discover I'd built my own world, with rules they never bothered to learn. The birthday dinner started in 6 hours. 6 hours until their carefully orchestrated humiliation would become their complete destruction. 2 hours before the dinner, I made a call that would seal the Whitmores' fate. My lawyer, Jennifer Walsh, had been waiting. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "Every contract is under Ortega Events International, your sole proprietorship. The Whitmores signed as clients, not partners. The cancellation clause is clear. You can terminate everything with immediate effect for breach of professional conduct by the client. And the deposits? Non-refundable. $800,000 they can't recover. Plus, they're liable for the full venue fees regardless of cancellation, another $400,000. What about Daniel's claim to my business? Jennifer laughed. Your business was established before marriage and maintained as a separate entity. His name appears on nothing. That postnup he wanted you to sign? It actually would have protected you more than him. I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset paint Rome gold. Below, staff scurried with final preparations. Florists arranged centerpieces worth more than my parents' car. The string quartet was rehearsing Eleanor's favorite piece. The cake, a 7-tier masterpiece, had been delivered an hour ago. Every vendor had been paid in advance from the Whitmore account. Every contract specified that cancellation forfeited all payments. I'd structured it this way months ago, never imagining I'd actually use it. It was just good business practice, protecting my vendors from client fickleness. One more thing, Jennifer added. I had my paralegal research Whitmore Corporation. If this event fails and they lose those deposits, 3 creditors can call in their loans immediately. They'll be bankrupt within a week. I'm not trying to destroy them, I said, though my conviction wavered. No, Jennifer agreed. You're just refusing to be destroyed by them. There's a difference. I ended the call and began dressing for dinner. The red gown I chose was perfection itself, a declaration of war disguised as evening wear. The grand ballroom of the Palazzo Margherita had been transformed into Eleanor's vision of heaven. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables dressed in silk and silver. Orchids flown in from Thailand cascaded from the ceiling. The guest list read like a who's who of international society: ambassadors, CEOs, old money, and new power. I arrived precisely at 8, my red gown a deliberate choice against the sea of pastels Eleanor had requested. Heads turned as I walked through the room, searching for my place card among the elaborate settings. Table 1, the Whitmore family and Victoria. Table 2, the Ashfords. Table 3, European nobility. I walked the entire room, checked every place card, 199 seats for 200 invited guests. My name appeared nowhere. "Excuse me," I asked a server. "There seems to be a mistake. Where's my seat?" The young man looked panicked. I'll check with the coordinator." But I was the coordinator. This was my event, my staff, my careful orchestration, and someone had deliberately removed my place setting. The murmur started small, rippling outward as guests noticed me standing, searching. Some whispered behind their hands. Others watched with naked curiosity. The abandoned wife, lost at her own family's celebration. Daniel appeared at my elbow, his cologne mixing with the scent of Victoria's perfume on his jacket. "There seems to be some confusion," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Perhaps you could check with the staff. I'm sure they can find you something in the back." The back, with the servers and kitchen staff. After 5 years of marriage, 3 months of planning this event, and a lifetime of trying to belong. Eleanor's voice rang out from the microphone at the head table. "Ladies and gentlemen, if everyone could find their seats, we're about to begin." Everyone except me. I stood in the center of the room, alone in a crowd of 200, exactly as they'd planned. Eleanor's eyes found mine across the ballroom, and her smile was a blade. Oh dear, did we forget someone? Her voice carried perfectly through the microphone, each word deliberate. The room fell silent. 200 faces turned to stare at me, standing alone in my red gown like a drop of blood on marble. Daniel appeared beside his mother, taking the microphone with practiced ease. His smile was casual, cruel. Oops, guess we miscounted. The chuckle that followed was worse than the words. I'm sure the staff can find you a chair somewhere. Victoria laughed from her seat, my seat, I realized, directly next to Daniel's. She wore white, bridal in its intention, her hand resting possessively on the chair Daniel should have pulled out for me. Perhaps, Eleanor continued, reclaiming the microphone, the help could find you something from storage? We wouldn't want you to miss the celebration. The help. After everything, I was the help. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. I caught the German ambassador's wife frowning, the Japanese CEO looking away, but most watched with the fascination of those witnessing a public execution. This is what happens, Eleanor continued, ostensibly addressing the room but looking directly at me. When we don't properly verify our guest list, some people assume they're invited when they're really just adjacent to the actual family. Adjacent, not part of. Never part of. Margaret started the slow clap, just 3 beats before others joined in, thinking it was part of some planned performance. The applause built as I stood frozen, my humiliation now receiving a standing ovation. Daniel returned to his seat, pulling out Victoria's chair with a flourish. She kissed his cheek as she sat, her lipstick leaving a mark for everyone to see. The message was clear. I was out, she was in, and everyone would witness the transition. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the hysteria they'd scripted for me. Instead, I smiled. Not a weak smile, not a defeated smile, but the smile of someone who finally understands the game and realizes they've already won it. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom without need for a microphone. Years of presenting to CEOs had taught me how to project authority. I pulled out my phone with deliberate calm, maintaining eye contact with Eleanor. The crowd watched, mesmerized by my composure. They expected tears, begging, a scene worthy of gossip. Instead, they got something far more unsettling: absolute control. Excuse me one moment, I said, still smiling. I need to make an important call. Daniel's smirk faltered slightly. Victoria's hand found his arm. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, the first hint of uncertainty crossing her face. I scrolled through my contacts slowly, letting the silence build. The room was so quiet I could hear the soft clink of ice in glasses, the rustle of silk as people leaned forward. "What are you doing?" Daniel hissed, starting to rise from his chair. "My job," I replied simply. Marcus Chen answered on the first ring. I put him on speaker, his voice filling the ballroom. "Caroline? Is it time?" "Yes," I said, looking directly at Eleanor. "Execute the emergency cancellation protocol. Immediately." "Understood. Confirming cancellation of all Whitmore events under Ortega Events International's authority." The words landed like bombs in the silent room. Eleanor's face went white. Daniel's mouth opened but no sound came. Victoria's perfectly painted lips formed a small O of surprise. "You've made your position crystal clear," I said to Eleanor, my voice steady as steel. "Now let me clarify mine. This is where everything changes. If you're still watching, you understand what it feels like to be pushed too far. Before I reveal what happened next, please take a second to like this video. It really helps other people who need to hear this story find it. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you had more power than your bullies thought? Share it in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories of strength inspire me. Now let me show you what 5 years of preparation looks like. Marcus Chen's voice continued through the speaker, clear and professional. "As CEO of Stellar Events International, I confirm your sole authority as primary contractor for all Whitmore Corporation events. Shall I proceed with immediate termination?" "What is this?" Eleanor stood, her composure cracking. "You can't." I can, I interrupted, pulling up the contracts on my phone and casting them to the ballroom's main screen, a feature I'd insisted on installing for presentations. Every single element of this week-long celebration was contracted through Ortega Events International. My company, my contracts, my decision. The master agreement appeared on the screen, 30 feet tall. The Whitmore signature was unmistakable at the bottom. Iguan. This is ridiculous, Daniel sputtered. You're my wife. What's yours is mine. Actually, Marcus's voice cut through. Ortega Events International is a sole proprietorship established before your marriage and maintained separately. Mrs. Ortega has exclusive authority. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The German ambassador's wife was recording on her phone. The Japanese CEO had a small smile. The society reporters who'd been invited were typing furiously. Furthermore, Marcus continued, per Section 8, Subsection 3 of your signed agreement, the contractor maintains the right to terminate immediately for breach of professional conduct, including but not limited to harassment, discrimination, or deliberate humiliation of contractor or contractor's representatives. I am the contractor, I announced to the room, and I've just been publicly humiliated by my clients. Eleanor sank back into her chair. The reality was hitting her. Every dollar spent, every arrangement made, every moment of this week ran through my company. Marcus, I said, still calm, still controlled. Notify all vendors. Full cancellation. Immediate effect. With pleasure. Estimated time for complete shutdown? I looked at my watch. Give them 30 minutes to say goodbye. The ballroom screen lit up with document after document as I scrolled through my phone. Each vendor contract appeared for seconds, long enough for the assembled guests to read the company name, Ortega Events International. The yacht tour tomorrow? I said conversationally. Cancelled. The private plane to the Amalfi Coast? Grounded. The finale at Via Corsini? The venue is already being cleared. You can't do this. Daniel was on his feet now, his face red. Mother's birthday. Your mother's birthday party was meant to secure 3 major investors to save Whitmore Corporation from bankruptcy, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Oh yes, I know about the federal investigation, the tax evasion charges, the loans you can't pay. The room erupted in whispers. Several investors were already moving toward the exits. Every single vendor, I continued, from the florist to the 5-star hotels, contracted with me. Not Whitmore Corporation, me. Which means, I pulled up another document. This $800,000 in deposits? Non-refundable to my company. The additional $400,000 in venue fees? Still owed regardless of cancellation. Eleanor stood again, shaking. You little... Careful, I warned. Defamation is also grounds for additional penalties under our contract. Victoria finally found her voice. This is insane. Daniel, do something. What would you like him to do? I asked her directly. Call his lawyer? The one who reviewed and approved these contracts? Or perhaps the family attorney who's currently defending Whitmore Corporation against federal charges? I turned to address the room. For 5 years, this family told me I was nothing. Nobody. Not good enough for their name, their table, their son. I looked at Daniel. You signed these contracts without reading them because you couldn't imagine I had any real power. You miscounted more than chairs. You miscounted me. Effective immediately, I announced, my voice ringing clear. All Whitmore family events are canceled. The hotel will be requesting checkout by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Your rooms are paid through tonight only. That's all the contract required. The screens around the room, I'd had them installed for the presentation of Eleanor's life story, now showed a countdown timer. 28 minutes until complete shutdown. The restaurant reservations at La Pergola, Imago, and Glass? Cancelled. The private tour of the Vatican? Cancelled. The string quartet, the DJ for tomorrow's yacht party, the fireworks display? All cancelled. Eleanor clutched her chest, swaying. 2 guests rushed to steady her, but she pushed them away, her eyes fixed on me with pure hatred. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the crowd, many now filming openly. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. However, as you've just witnessed, the Whitmores believe in counting carefully who belongs and who doesn't. They've made it clear I don't count, so neither does this celebration. The money, Daniel whispered, the blood draining from his face. We already paid. $1.2 million, I confirmed. All non-refundable per the terms you signed. Your mother wanted the best, demanded the best, and signed for the best. She just forgot that the best was mine to give or take away. The German ambassador's wife stood up. This is the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed, she said, starting a slow clap of her own. This time the applause was real, building as other guests joined in, not mocking but amazed. Eleanor collapsed into her chair as the reality hit. Without this week, without these investors, Whitmore Corporation was finished. The family fortune, built over generations, destroyed in a single moment of deliberate cruelty toward the wrong person. The timer showed 25 minutes. Already, I could see catering staff beginning to clear tables. The security team entered the ballroom. My security team, I should clarify, hired through Ortega Events International. Their presence was professional, non-threatening, but unmistakable in its message. Ladies and gentlemen, the head of security announced, we've been instructed to escort all guests from the premises within the next 20 minutes. Please gather your belongings. This is assault! Daniel shouted, rushing toward me. Security stepped between us smoothly. It's contract enforcement, I corrected. Page 47, Section 12. Upon cancellation, all event spaces must be vacated within 30 minutes. The lights began dimming systematically, starting from the edges of the room. The music stopped. Servers appeared with boxes, packing the silverware and centerpieces with practiced efficiency. The 7-tier cake was being wheeled away, untouched. Please, Victoria grabbed my arm. My family is here. My parents, my business partners. This humiliation is exactly what you planned for me, I finished. Except I'm not making you stand alone while everyone watches. I'm simply ending a business arrangement. She released my arm as if burned. Around us, the chaos was controlled but absolute. Investors were on phones with lawyers. Society matrons were calling their drivers. The press was having a field day. Daniel tried one last time. Caroline, you're my wife. This is community property. Your prenup, I reminded him, which you insisted I sign, specifically excludes all business ventures established before marriage. Ortega Events International was incorporated 2 months before we met. You protected yourself from my nothing. Congratulations. Eleanor, supported by Margaret, passed by me on her way out. She stopped, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. You've destroyed us, she hissed. No, I replied calmly. I simply stopped letting you destroy me. There's a difference. With 10 minutes left on the clock, the Whitmores made their last desperate play. Eleanor, Daniel, and their lawyer cornered me near the exit. Name your price, Eleanor said, all pretense gone. What will it take to reverse this? There is no price, I replied. The contracts are clear. Cancellation is final. We'll sue, the lawyer threatened, though his voice lacked conviction. Please do. I pulled out my phone, showing them an email from Jennifer. My attorney has already reviewed everything. You signed away your rights to dispute cancellation in the force majeure clause. You wanted ironclad contracts to prevent vendors from backing out. You got them. Daniel grabbed the phone, reading frantically. This says we owe another $400,000 even with cancellation? Venue minimum fees, I confirmed. Due within 30 days. Check page 63 of what you signed. But the company, Eleanor's voice broke. Without these investors, we'll lose everything. You should have thought of that before you counted me out, I said simply. Victoria appeared with her parents, all three looking stricken. The Ashford merger, she said to Daniel. Tell her about the merger. Maybe if she knows. I already know, I cut her off. 2 years of messages between you. The planned announcement tonight. The divorce papers Daniel was going to file claiming I was unstable. I looked at the growing crowd of evacuating guests. Would you like me to share those screenshots with everyone here? The Ashfords backed away from Daniel as if he were radioactive. Victoria's father, a man who'd built his fortune on reputation, looked disgusted. We're leaving, he announced. Victoria, come. But Daddy. Now. He looked at me with something like respect. Well played, Mrs. Ortega. 5 minutes remained. The ballroom was nearly empty, the grandeur dismantled, the illusion shattered. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high, leaving the Whitmores in the wreckage of their own making. Behind me, the lights shut off section by section, like a theater closing after the final act. In the lobby, chaos reigned. 200 confused, angry, fascinated guests were trying to process what they'd witnessed. Some were rebooking flights on their phones. Others were calling lawyers. The press was interviewing anyone who would talk. Mrs. Ortega! A reporter rushed over. Can you comment on what just happened? I enforced a contract, I said simply. Nothing more, nothing less. My phone buzzed with messages. 3 were from major event planning clients impressed by my handling of the situation. 1 was from Marcus. 3 venues want to book immediately for the dates you just freed up. Shall I proceed? Yes, I texted back. I'd already packed my bags that afternoon, somehow knowing this was how it would end. The taxi to the airport was waiting, booked under my company card, not the Whitmore account. As I passed through the lobby, something unexpected happened. The German ambassador's wife stopped me. That was magnificent, she said quietly. My daughter is getting married next year. May I have your card? Then the Japanese CEO. I have need of someone with your attention to detail and backbone. By the time I reached the taxi, I had 7 new business cards and 12 serious inquiries. The Whitmores had tried to destroy my reputation. Instead, they'd made me legendary. My phone rang one last time. Daniel. I declined the call and blocked the number. Then Eleanor. Block. Margaret. Block. Victoria. Block. 5 years of trying to earn their acceptance. One night to realize I never needed it. The taxi pulled away as the hotel lights dimmed behind me. By the time my flight landed in Boston, #Whitmore disaster was trending worldwide. A guest's video of Eleanor asking, "Did we forget someone?" followed by my calm response had 3 million views and counting. The immediate fallout was brutal for the Whitmores. Guests who'd flown in from Dubai had to pay triple for last-minute hotel bookings. The Japanese delegation missed their connecting flights because the planned transportation was canceled. One Saudi prince's assistant sent an invoice for $50,000 in inconvenience fees directly to Whitmore Corporation. But the social consequences were worse. Boston society, which thrives on appearances, doesn't forgive public humiliation. The charity boards Eleanor sat on began calling emergency meetings. The country club where the Whitmores had been members for 90 years was reviewing their status. Victoria's family distanced themselves immediately. Her father released a statement. The Ashford family has no association with the Whitmore Corporation and was unaware of the evening's planned events. The merger, their last hope, was dead. My lawyer Jennifer called while I was in the taxi home. Daniel's attorney reached out. They want to discuss settlement terms. For the divorce? No, for the contract breach. They can't pay the $400,000. They're requesting a payment plan. I almost laughed. They'd tried to force me to sign away my rights for $50,000. Now they were begging for payment terms on money they owed me. Standard terms, I told her. 30% interest on late payments. The best part came from an unexpected source. 3 of Eleanor's friends reached out to me directly. They'd been planning events and wanted to ensure they had proper contracts. Translation: they'd seen what happened when you crossed me and wanted to be on my good side. Within a week, Whitmore Corporation imploded exactly as predicted. 3 major creditors called in their loans after the Rome debacle made international news. The federal investigation intensified when investors reported suspicious financial statements. The board called an emergency meeting and voted Daniel out as future CEO. Eleanor's charity, The Whitmore Foundation lost 5 of its 8 major donors. "We cannot be associated with such public cruelty," one donor wrote in their withdrawal letter, copying me on the email. The foundation's annual gala, Boston's most exclusive event, was canceled indefinitely. The family was forced to liquidate assets quickly. The Beacon Hill mansion went on the market first. Under value, desperate for cash. The beach house in Martha's Vineyard followed. Then the art collection, the vintage cars, even Eleanor's prized jewelry. Daniel's personal collapse was swift. The board discovered he'd been using company funds for his trips with Victoria, listing them as business expenses. Embezzlement charges were added to his growing legal troubles. His trust fund, already depleted, couldn't cover his lawyers. My business, meanwhile, exploded. The Rome video became a masterclass in contract management and professional boundaries. Event planners studied it. Business schools requested case studies. I received speaking invitations from 3 major conferences. Marcus Chen made good on his partnership offer. Ortega Events International became a subsidiary of Stellar Events, with me as president of the North American division. My first-year revenue projection, $12 million. "You know what the ironic part is?" Marcus said during our signing dinner. "The Whitmores could have been your greatest advocates. Instead, they became your best marketing campaign." He was right. Every client who hired me knew exactly what they were getting. Someone who couldn't be pushed around, couldn't be bullied, and absolutely couldn't be counted out. The divorce was uncontested and swift. Daniel couldn't afford to fight it, and any judge who saw those messages between him and Victoria would have ruled against him anyway. I asked for nothing except what was already mine: my company, my dignity, my future. "Don't you want alimony?" Jennifer asked. "You're entitled." "I don't want a penny from them," I said. "Let him keep his family name and all the debt that comes with it." My success attracted attention I hadn't expected. 53 event bookings came in the first month after Rome, but more interesting were the clients. Other outsiders who'd married into prominent families, entrepreneurs who'd been dismissed by old money, immigrants who'd built empires while being told they didn't belong. "You gave us permission to stop trying to fit in," one client told me, a tech CEO who'd been excluded from San Francisco's elite circles. "You showed us that building our own table is better than begging for a seat at theirs." I moved to a penthouse in the Seaport District, a sleek, modern space that was everything the Whitmore Mansion wasn't: bright, open, mine. No portraits of disapproving ancestors, no rooms I wasn't welcome in, no history that didn't include me. 3 months after Rome, I was having coffee in Back Bay when I saw them. Daniel and Victoria, sitting at a corner table. He looked older, defeated. She looked angry. They were arguing in harsh whispers about money, about promises, about how this wasn't what she'd waited 5 years for. They saw me. I could have walked past, pretended not to notice. Instead, I smiled, genuinely, without malice, and waved, the same wave Victoria had given me by the fountain in Rome. Then I walked on, leaving them to their misery. 6 months after Rome, I gave my first keynote speech at the International Event Planners Conference. The title, "Boundaries Are Not Walls: Professional Power in Personal Situations." People ask if I regret what happened in Rome, I told the audience of 2,000. I regret that it took 5 years. I regret every moment I dimmed my light to make others comfortable with their darkness, but I don't regret standing up. The lesson wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about recognizing that seeking approval from people who've already decided you're unworthy is a game you can't win. The only winning move is to stop playing. Boundaries aren't walls of anger, I explained. They're bridges to self-respect. When someone shows you repeatedly that you don't matter to them, believe them, then act accordingly. My new policy was simple. I didn't work with clients who disrespected me or my staff. I didn't accept meetings where I was treated as less than. I didn't dim my success to make others comfortable. The Whitmores had taught me that no amount of accommodation would ever be enough for people determined to see you as beneath them. A year later, Daniel reached out through a mutual acquaintance. He was working as a mid-level manager at a small firm, living in a studio apartment. Victoria had left him when the money ran out. His family blamed him for their downfall. He wanted to meet, to explain. I declined politely. There was nothing to explain. He'd shown me who he was every time he let his family humiliate me. Every time he chose their approval over my dignity. Every time he whispered, "Just ignore it," instead of standing up. Success, I learned, isn't the best revenge. Success is just success. The best revenge is living a life where the people who hurt you become irrelevant. Today, 3 years after that night in Rome, Ortega Events International is valued at $40 million. We have offices in Boston, New York, Los Angeles, and yes, Rome. That hotel where Eleanor Whitmore tried to erase me? We now have the exclusive contract for all their international events. The Whitmores are a cautionary tale in Boston society now. Eleanor lives in a small apartment in Brookline, ironically, not far from where my parents raised me. The dynasty built over 5 generations was destroyed in 30 minutes because they couldn't count one person as worthy of basic respect. I met someone new last year. James owns a tech company, comes from a middle-class family in Michigan, and has never once apologized for my success. His parents, both teachers, were thrilled their son found someone so accomplished and kind. Imagine that, being valued for who you are, not despite it. The truth I learned that night in Rome is simple. You don't need their table when you own the whole restaurant. You don't need their approval when you have your own applause. You don't need to be counted by people who've already decided you don't count. If you're watching this and you're sitting at a table where you're tolerated but not celebrated, where you're present but not seen, where you're constantly told you're not enough, let me tell you something. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are not too anything. You are exactly enough for people who deserve you. The Whitmores spent 5 years trying to convince me I was nobody. They were right about one thing. I was nobody to them, but I was somebody to myself. And in the end, that's the only count that matters. Stand up, walk away, build your own table, and never, ever let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve your seat. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below. What's one boundary you wish you had set earlier? Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to know your worth. I post new stories every week about standing up with dignity and grace. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Your comments mean everything. I read every single one, and your stories of strength inspire me daily. And always remember, the best revenge is a life well lived on your own terms. Until next time, this is Caroline reminding you, never beg for a seat at a table you can flip.